I've always wanted an opportunity to speak to students your age because I never had someone to guide me when I was a junior in high school. So I remember going to Brooklyn Tech, and there was just so much pressure in that school to excel. So I always got like over 95% on all my exams, and every grade I had for every class, I think my average ended up being like 99.8 because I felt like I had to always study and push myself, right? And I remember staying up till like 10 p.m. most nights doing my homework, only to wake up again at 6:45 so I can make it to school on time by 8. And then we end school at around 4 p.m. because Brooklyn Tech forces you to take around 10 periods worth of classes to make you competitive to get into a great college. And then just to repeat the cycle every day all over again. And not only that, not just have good grades, but you also have to have the extracurriculars, right? So, to get into a really good college, you need some sort of leadership position or to join a variety of clubs. So I ended up joining the Brooklyn Tech Red Cross Club for 2 years. And then in my junior year, I became the president of the club. And then I took the club from 50 members and I grew it to over 200 members in a year. So that's quite an accomplishment. But then when my guidance counselor sat me down and then asked me, what is it that I wanted to do with my life and which college that I want to go to, I told her I didn't have any plans to go to college because I felt so much pressure in this kind of environment to do all the homework that I never really had the time to explore myself, right? They, like I was explaining to her before, they make you pick a major, right? So I chose the social science research major, and the kinds of classes I had to take are like psychology, anthropology, sociology, human geography, history. And the thing is, like, what if I have interests in that, but so many other things, right? Like I also wanted to learn design. I wanted to learn maybe something about jewelry. I always wanted to work with my hands, but the kind of education you get in a regular high school or any specialized high school doesn't cater to that, right? So I didn't want to make the wrong mistake by just going like, oh, I'm interested in these liberal arts studies, so I might as well also go to a liberal arts college. I thought it'd be a better idea to explore on my own for maybe a few years after graduating high school. What is it that I exactly liked doing before I commit to 4 years of my life and tens of thousands of dollars to a program that I'm going to probably end up regretting, right? But this guidance counselor didn't like my idea. So instead, she sat me down every week to convince me that I was going to be a failure if I didn't go straight to college. And then I remember she sat me down one day with my parents and asked my parents if my parents were okay with this decision. And my parents are immigrants, and they have no idea how education here in the United States works. They have no idea how much it costs. They don't know what kind of programs are out there, what kind of scholarships. So they can't give me the kind of guidance that I needed. And the only thing that they knew was Harvard is like the best thing ever, right? Like, oh, well, if you're gonna do something with your life, you should go to Harvard because everyone who goes to Harvard ends up being successful after they graduate. Or they had this kind of concept in their head. But even though they had this concept, my dad was a teacher himself in China. And so he has this philosophy, like, you can't really force somebody to do something if they're not going to end up being good at it, right? So he just stayed quiet the whole time, and my mom just stayed quiet. And they just said, we'll just let Annie decide what she wants to do. So they didn't give me guidance, but they didn't like punish me for choosing a different path. So it was kind of like an in-between where I had no mentorship, but I also had freedom, right? And then after graduating high school, I ended up working at ShopRite on Avenue I as a cashier. And I worked like a whole bunch of minimum wage jobs, like for a hardware store, and I'm working for a massage parlor, another grocery store. So I just like worked a whole string of minimum wage jobs. And in that time period, this is when I was 18 to 20, I felt like a very strong case of FOMO because you see, the kind of friends that I had in high school, they they were just like me. They had the straight A's, they had the extracurriculars. So all of my close friends in high school, they ended up going to Cornell and NYU, some went to Harvard, all these like really fancy name schools. And I felt like I was being left behind here working a dead-end job that's gonna take me nowhere in life, right? So I got really, really depressed during this time. And then I started eating a lot of chocolate. I remember I was eating like 3 bars of chocolate a day, and I was really ashamed of what I was doing. So I was hiding the candy wrappers in my room, and then eventually it piled up into like this big bunch of like candy wrappers, and I always left my door closed, but one day my dad walked in and he's like, "What is this?" I was really embarrassed, and on top of that, my doctor gave me a blood test and told me my sugar level was so high that I was borderline pre-diabetic, right? So at that point, I was like, well, you know, eating chocolate to make myself feel better is not working out. So I decided to like pick myself up by doing meditation, maybe exploring myself a bit better. I used the money from my minimum wage jobs I saved half of it for my future. So maybe I wanted to travel, or maybe I want to teach English abroad. So I saved half of it for just in case I have a future goal. And then the other half I used to explore what my interests are. I used a lot of free resources. So every week I would go to the New York Public Library to read books on various topics that I was interested in. So for example, I would read books about sewing. I remember reading books about HTML and CSS because I wanted to design a website. So a lot of like different things that I learned about for free every single week by reading books from the library. I would scour the internet for articles. And then of course, because I felt like if my peers going to colleges are going to have better paying jobs than me after they finish at 22 years old, then if I'm not capable of making as much money as they are, maybe the best thing I can do is to save as much money as possible. Because there are people out there who make $100,000 a year and still manage to save nothing because they spend all of it. So I thought to myself, well, even if I don't make that much, what if I get really good at saving my money, which is where all of these tips came up, because I did a lot of research on how to save money and then I implemented it myself. And then, so at 20 years old, I managed to save up $13,000. And at that point, at 20, I was working at a hardware store. I just broke up with my boyfriend. I felt like it was the end of the world. I had no one to support me. I felt like no one to confide in about how I felt and my feelings. All of a sudden, that week, we had a customer come into the store to buy kitchen cabinets. And I got on the ground to play with her dog. I thought her dog was so cute. And she just looked at me and she said, "You, young lady, you're a smart lady. I want to give you a job." And then I was like, "Who, me? I didn't even talk to you yet. And you're trying to offer me a job?" She's like, "Yes." So I went to her office in Park Slope. And she was like, "Where's your resume?" And then I was like, "What resume? I don't know how to write a resume." And then she forced me to write a resume on the spot. And then she saw that I went to Brooklyn Tech but didn't go to college after. She's like, "What are you doing with your life?" And then I was like, "I don't know." Okay, I'm sorry. And then she told me I needed to get my life back on track. So she suggested that I apply to Kingsborough Community College. So, you know, the next day I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply to Kingsborough, and I applied and I got in. And then she was surprised that I had acted on this information so quickly. And then she also told me to take a personal development course. I think it was like $650 for 3 days, which of course I had because I had saved up a lot of money. And then I took it. Now, I really valued this woman's advice because she's a self-made millionaire, okay? Like, nobody else in my life I took advice from, because I believe in taking advice from people who are already doing what you want to do. And she just happens to, she was orphaned at 17 years old. She moved to America when she was 20. She had gotten married, she had 3 kids. At some point they divorced and she became a single mom. And as she worked really hard, she became a self-made millionaire and she owns several properties in Park Slope. Right, so I was really impressed by her. She must know what she's doing. So that's why I took her advice very seriously. And everything she told me to do, I followed. And in this course that she recommended that I take, this course promises to solve any problem you have in 3 days. So the problem I was asking is, what do I want to do with my life? That's the problem. Like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. What do I want to do with my life? And I remember at some point in the course, the speaker said, we all have problems in life. You're always going to have a problem. The question is, what kind of problems do you want to have? You get to choose what kind of problems you want to have. If you want to have family problems, if you want to have career problems. And then she recommended you pick a problem that's bigger than yourself. Some sort of problem that is so big, you commit your life to solving it, right? And I remember I stood up in the audience and I said, you know what? I want to solve people's financial problems. I want to make it so that people can stop living paycheck to paycheck and that they learn how to become financially free. This is what I'm going to commit my life to doing. So at that point, I finally knew what I wanted to do. So now it made sense to go to college and to commit my life to doing something like this. You know, all this money, all this time. But even in Kingsborough Community College, I remember, like, you would think if I want to help people with their finances, I would major in accounting or finance, something related to that, right? And I thought that at first, and I was going on that track. However, at some point in the middle, I took an internship working for a financial firm. And I just remember hearing the owner of the company on the phone all day long trying to sell Macy's stock and going on and on about how Macy's is such a great stock to buy. And I was like, is this what being a financial analyst or, you know, a financial planner is like? You sit on the phone all day trying to sell people stocks instead of like actually guiding people on what they should do with their money, right? And I thought, this is not the life for me, you know? So at that point, I thought, you know, maybe I should not major in anything finance related. I was not interested. Maybe I want to be a public speaker and so I could learn the communication skills to be able to teach people. So I ended up majoring in communications. Now, my time at Kingsborough, though, everything's going fine, right? But I got into some run-ins with the professors there. I had like one lab professor who showed up to his labs 30 minutes late every day, and I got really annoyed. There's another one, he was teaching the economics class, and he would teach the first chapter of the textbook. Then he would spend days 2, 3, 4, 5 teaching the same chapter. Then he would spend the next 5 days teaching chapters 2. Then the next 5 days teaching chapter 3. Like, he was so slow. He ended up spending 5 days repeating everything he just said again and again and again. I was like, is this an education? And then I had the third one that just like made me lose my mind was an English class. I went to this English class once a week. Okay, it was a 3-hour once a week class. And the teacher said, you need to have this book and bring it to class every time. I remember 2 days before that class, I took the book out of my bag to check something for my homework. I forgot to put it back into my bag. I showed up to the class without my book, but half of the class showed up to the class without their book as well. She was so angry that she blew up and was just like, if you don't have your book, I'm marking you as absent. So you can participate, but you're gonna be marked absent and you will get no participation grade. And I thought to myself, is this really what getting an education is like, where a teacher gets so upset about half the class not having a book, when you can just sit next to somebody who has the book and you can read from the same book, problem solved. She didn't need to do that. And I thought, you know, this is not an education, right? I'm here to get an education so that I can further my career. I don't want to deal with these kind of politics in school. So I researched different ways to finish college faster. And I came across this news article about this guy who tested out of college. He studied for the exams on his own. They're similar to what you would call like AP exams. They're a similar level and style, but they're just called like CLEP exams, right? And so he had done that, and he had tested out of his degree, and he paid only $80 an exam, and he got 3 college credits per exam. So I was like researching how he did it, and I bought his $300 course so he could teach me how to do it. And then I managed to come up with a plan to graduate college with a bachelor's degree in only 2 years instead of 4, and spending only like $10,000 on the degree. And I was telling a lot of people in my life, like, this is the plan. I'm going to graduate with my bachelor's degree in just 2 years. And people were looking at me like, there's no prestige in this. Nobody's heard of your school before. And are you sure you're going to be able to get a good job after? And I was like, you know what? It's okay. I just want to tick the box. I don't care if someone has never heard of my school before. I will find ways to make up for that lack of prestige in other ways, right? I will find a way to differentiate myself from other candidates for a job without having the name of my school making the statement for me. So I did that. I followed his plan. I tested out of all my classes, and I finished my bachelor's degree in only 2 years for $10,000. At some point, of course, I have to differentiate myself from everyone else, right? I'm always networking, always trying to meet new people. And one of the ways you can network that I was reading about is you can go to conferences and expos. And since I wanted to do business, there was a small business expo going on at the Javits Center in Manhattan on a weekend, and I decided to go. You never know what might happen. And over there at that expo, there was this speaker talking about how to write a book in 40 hours. And I was like, wow, you can write a book in just 40 hours? That's really interesting, right? And he did this really high pressure sales pitch to get people to put their money down now. Like if you put your money down now, it's only gonna be $97. But not only that, if you put your money down right now, you can bring a friend for free. So I turned to the person next to me who I don't even know. And I was like, are you interested? She's like, yeah. I said, you know what? Instead of each of us spending $97 to attend this course that he's selling, why don't I spend $97 and you pay me for half and then we can both go together? So, you know, I ended up spending only about $45 on this course. And then I went to the course and he outlined this step-by-step process on how you can write a book in just 40 hours. And I was like, you know what, this is doable. I can do it, right? And I started brainstorming on topics that I knew really well. And that's how I came up with this idea, 1,001 Ways to Save Money. I wrote this book in only 3 months. It didn't take a year, it didn't take 2 years. I wrote it in 3 months. It took me like, 2 months to write the draft, then another 2 weeks to edit it on Grammarly. I got a Grammarly subscription for only $42.50 at the time. And then I spent another $200 for the images on the book because they're copyrighted. On Shutterstock.com. And then I just photoshopped it myself and said, voila, I'm an author now. I have a book and therefore I'm credible and I know what I'm talking about. So I put on my resume that I graduated from this school and it didn't matter. Nobody cared because right under that line, I wrote author of 1001 Ways to Save Money, 2017. And then every time I went into a job interview, I got, oh my gosh, wow, you're an author? That's so cool. Can you tell me more about your book? I'm like, yeah, you can buy a copy on Amazon, like a real copy. It's not a ebook, right? I managed to land like, I think 90% of the jobs from interviews because I have something different to share, right? I don't have just my college degree to speak for me. I found other ways. I started a YouTube channel to talk to people about how to save their money. And I put that on my resume as well. I teach millennials how they can stop living paycheck to paycheck. And when interviewers would look at my resume, they'd be like, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more? So, you know, I have other ways to add value to a company. I remember right after graduating with a bachelor's degree, I had moved to this really small town in the middle of nowhere in Texas to be with my husband. There was no job opportunity there. Like everywhere you go is just a fast food joint. There's no such thing as a good job there. Like a good job there pays $13 an hour. And over here, minimum wage is like $15 an hour, right? It's like nothing. So I ended up working at Domino's Pizza there for maybe a year and a half. And I thought to myself, like, is this what I signed up for? Like, I'm here working at Domino's Pizza where I see like all these people who went to like these Ivy League colleges, living in these big cities where there's plenty of jobs. They got like these nice entry-level jobs right away. I'm here with my online college degree that's no one ever heard of, and then I'm working at Domino's Pizza. I probably did make a wrong decision there. Like at that point, I had a little bit of regret, right? But actually, I won't go into it today because it's not related. Domino's Pizza ended up being like the best job I ever had. Like It's because right now, this year, I started my own company, and a lot of the things that I do at my company, I learned from Domino's Pizza. So everything I've come across along the way, all these experiences and skills, they've all contributed to what I'm doing now, right? But when I moved to Boston, where there's like plenty of jobs, right? So your geography matters as well, not just your own degree. Where you live matters for opportunity. When I moved to Boston, I landed jobs like this. I would apply, then the next day I would get a request for interview. In 4 days, I would do the interview, then I would get hired on the spot. So, your geography matters a lot. You have to think about that as well. So I'm always looking for ways to learn more things, right? I was earning money at this job I landed in Boston, and I just thought to myself, they're raising the rents every year. The cost of living is always going up. I feel like I can't keep up, right? And I found this course online by Ramit Sethi called How to Earn $1,000 on the Side in addition to your full-time job. So you don't have to quit your full-time job, but just make $1,000 on the side. He said it's reasonable, right? So it's just reasonable for it to feel comfortable, but it's not like out of reach for you. So it's a good goal to have. And I took the course. And so many people taking this course online were like, this course is a scam. He doesn't know what he's talking about. The course doesn't work. And I thought to myself, there's no way this doesn't work. He's done it himself, right? I learn only from people who have already done what I want to do. He must be teaching something really valuable here, right? So I asked my friend, I said, I'm taking this course and I hope it works out for me, but I have a feeling that the reason most people don't have success with this course is because they're not applying what they learn. So they'll read the material, just like in college. You just read the material, but you don't apply what you learn. So I told her, keep me accountable. Every week, I will learn something new from this course. I will come back to you. I will tell you 3 things I'm going to do after reading this material from him, and I'm gonna go do it. Then next day, I'm gonna come back and tell you I did it, and I'll move on to the next 3 things I can do. So I did this for like 12 weeks, and then after 12 weeks, I landed my first client. I charged this first client $150 a month, and I was like, okay, I got something. Now I just have to repeat what I did again and again until I reached 1,000, right? So I just kept repeating what I did again and again till I reached 1,000. And then at 1,000, I was like, wow, actually that was really, well, it was hard, right? But then when you look back, you're like, that's really easy, right? And then, so after that point, it's just a matter of scaling it up. So I went from making that first year $2,000 for the whole year. Then the next year I made $5,000. The year after that, I made $20,000. Last year, I brought in $40,000. And then I signed a whole bunch of new contracts this year with new clients. So right now, I have contracts that add up to $80,000 a year, just on the side, on top of my full-time job. So I still work my full-time job, but I also have this side business that I'm working on growing. And then last month, I also hired 2 employees to help me. So, this thing is growing. And I think a major part of my success is I've asked people for their advice. I really follow it because I don't ask random people for their advice. Like, if they're already doing what I want to do, I will follow. I think the problem that a lot of people encounter that's your age, right, is you will get advice from your guidance counselor. Your guidance counselor has no idea what it's like to be an engineer, what it's like to be an accountant. Like, they only know how to do guidance counseling, right? They've never worked in a business. So while they're an adult, and when I was your age, I always thought adults knew what they were talking about. So they must be right? We grow up our whole lives listening to adults talk. Actually, the fact is, they might be speaking without any credibility. Like the guidance counselor that I had when I was in Brooklyn Tech, telling me that I'm gonna be a failure if I don't go straight to college. Like, I took her word like it was God, as if like that's my fate that she gave me, right? And I wanted to like work so hard to work against the fate that I was given. But actually looking back now, I can see as a 27-year-old that she was actually just a 30-year-old woman who has not done anything else besides academia and guidance counseling, telling me that I was going to be a failure if I didn't follow the path that she followed, right? So you have to be wary of the kind of people you listen to for advice, especially like your parents. I know a lot of us, we grow up following what our parents say, but it also applies to your parents. Like if you go to your parents for career advice, and they're not in the career that you're interested in, you probably should take their advice with a grain of salt, right? Like if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to be a jewelry maker, you should probably look for an existing jewelry maker on how they got started on their path. You shouldn't be asking your parents, hey mom, what do you think I should do, right? Because your mom's not going to be able to give you any specific actionable advice that works. So I wanted to go over, I summed up why this is so important for you in this worksheet here. See, the statistic, well, when I went to Brooklyn Tech, it's 99.9% of people went straight to college, but actually for the average high school, which is not Brooklyn Tech, only about 66% of students go on to college, right? Then out of that, a full third of them drop out after the first year because they can't afford to do it. And then out of who remains, half of them will graduate with student loans and the other half will not. So you guys want to end up in that 18% where you graduate with a bachelor's degree debt-free, right? And then not only that, I think to win is not to just graduate without student loan debt, but also to work in a career or job that you actually majored in, right? A lot of people, they graduate and then they're underemployed, meaning they work a job that didn't require a degree to begin with, or they work a job that's not related to their major at all. And so I would say, don't start with the question, which college do you want to go to? What do you want to major in and which programs are the best for you, right? I think a lot of people start with this question, especially your guidance counselors, like they start the conversation with this question, which college do you want to go to? What do you want to major in? They start with that. And I think that question should come later. I think the first question should just be, what do you want to do? What are you passionate about? And of course, where do you want to live? Because if you want to live in the middle of nowhere, you kind of have to understand your dreams are unrealistic if you want to work as like a software engineer, right? So you also have to ask yourself, where do you want to live? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? You won't discover that till a few years later. You might know some of your strengths now. Maybe you have some artistic or creative, strengths. Maybe you're attentive to detail like me. Maybe you have an analytical mind, but you want to go into a career that fits your strength. You don't want to strengthen your weakness. You want to focus on what you're already good at. I went to a Toastmasters meeting and I gave my first speech and everyone was like, wow, you have talent. Like I never knew I had talent to speak in front of people, right? But when I discovered this talent, then I honed in on the strength, right? I don't try to I'm really bad at physics and I really don't understand chemistry. I don't try to force myself to get really good at physics and chemistry, right? I try to force myself to get really good at what I'm already good at. So then, there's just no debate that I'm amazing at it. I think a lot of people focus on trying to strengthen those weaknesses when it should really be the opposite way. So these questions here will take a while to figure out. These are not things that you just take a month and you know it, right? So and I think a lot of people, they say to themselves, they'll answer these questions in college. They'll pick a college and then they'll explore various electives and stuff like that in their college time to figure out what is it that they're interested in. And for me personally, it just doesn't work. I think it's expensive and slow process because the way I see it is you can take about 4 to 5 classes a semester. So really for 4 to 5 classes a semester, you get to choose this many interests, right? You have to stick with it for about 3 to 4 months. So it'll take you 3 to 4 months to realize that you don't like something, versus for me, the way I did it, I read books at the library, I watched videos and stuff. I figured out after 2 weeks, yeah, that's not for me. Let me move on to something else, right? It's very quick, very low stakes, very quick. There's no grade attached to what I was doing, so I didn't have any pressure to finish something that I didn't enjoy. So that's something I think is a good piece of advice for you guys that you can actually start doing now. You don't have to wait till you graduate high school to figure out, right? Because there's a lot of resources out there for you to try now before you decide. The other thing is to research. So I wish someone had told me this when I was doing it because I didn't know. But if I could go back to when I was 17 and tell myself to research, what does research mean? I would go on LinkedIn.com, I would make a profile, And there's this premium service to LinkedIn. It's called LinkedIn Premium, and they offer a 30-day free trial. Normally the price is $80 a month. It's very expensive, but for 30 days, I think you can take full advantage of it. And what you can do is you can set various filters in LinkedIn Premium to find other people on LinkedIn who fit those filters. So you can filter like who went to Hunter College and graduated with a bachelor's degree in da-da-da-da-da-da. You can do those kind of searches with LinkedIn Premium, and it'll pull up all these profiles of people who did that. You can click on their profiles and you can view their full profile without them seeing that they viewed your profile, right? And then you can see the kind of career trajectory that they've had, like what kind of job they've ended up working in after graduating with that degree. You can compile into like an Excel sheet a list of those names, where they ended up after college with their degree, right? Then you can get a very good idea like, oh, looks like half of the people graduating from this program actually did not end up using their degree. Like they may have like majored in finance, but they ended up working as a marketer, you know? So if it's like really important to you, well, you want to end up in a program that will actually help you get a job in the field that you want to do, right? So this is a good way to research without other people knowing. But you know, I would even go a step further. I would add these people on LinkedIn and I would code message them and say, hi, my name's Annie and I'm a high schooler right now deciding which college I want to go to. I saw on your profile that you went to this program. I'm interested in this program, but I'm not sure about it. Would you take 20 minutes out of your day to get on a phone call with me so I can ask you some questions about your experience in this program and whether you recommend it or not? Do you regret this program? What would you have done differently during this time in your program so that I can avoid those kind of pitfalls? Do you think that this degree has helped you get a job in your related career after college? This is like the way to network, right? Like you don't have to wait until you get into college to network with other people. You can proactively code network with people. And I know it gets like a little scary and intimidating to like go like, oh, I'm emailing this person and what are they gonna think of me? But actually, I think a lot of people, when they respond, you'll see that they'll be happy to answer you. But they might not respond at all. They're really busy. But if you reached out to like 100 people, you'll find that maybe 10 people will get back to you and want to answer your questions. And 10 people is just more than enough for you to get like a really good idea of whether this program is very good or not, right? So not just like the cost. Just because something is free or low cost doesn't necessarily mean that it will get you to where you want to go, right? So you want something that will get you to where you want to go and is also affordable for you at the same time. Like it has to meet two criteria. So that's what I recommend when you do LinkedIn. Another thing is you should look for local companies here if you plan to work in New York City, right? I'm just using it as an example. Local companies here in New York City through just a Google search that are already offering jobs that you are interested in. Like if you wanted to work for an architecture firm, right? You can look for architecture firms here in New York City and then just email them and go like, hi, my name's Annie and I'm currently a high school student in Brooklyn Tech. I'm interested in maybe this architecture program, but I'm not sure. So I actually wanted to talk to an actual firm and ask them, hey, do you guys hire from this kind of program? What are your actual thoughts about this program that I'm interested in? And in your experience, who are the best candidates? Like which out of the best candidates that you've hired for the jobs for your firm, which schools did they go to? So I could consider those schools as well, right? You want to actually ask them. So then you're not like trying to make decisions out of thin air or like what you want to believe, right? A lot of times we want to make decisions based on what we want to believe, but you want to make them based on reality. Okay, so that's the second piece of advice. And the third thing is to learn something new every single day, right? In the beginning, it looks like it doesn't add up, but I've spent like my last 10 years learning something new every single day. So this is the price that I pay for all the success I've had along the way. I spend about an hour a day learning, whether it's a podcast or reading a book or watching a Udemy course in double speed so I can get more information into my brain. Like I I come across all these resources and then I'll take notes in my notebook that I can look back to for later, so then I don't have to read the whole book again or watch the whole course again. Like, I have all these notes in a notebook, and this helps me, first of all, retain the information, find the information quickly, and then I'll also write down the kinds of action steps that I can take. So for example, one of the things I wanted to learn was like how to develop your personal brand, right? So one of the several list of action steps that I learned that I could take is discover the 2 colors that I should always go with, right? Discover like the kind of font family that I always want to use. Make my banner on LinkedIn look nice. Like a list of action steps, at least 3 that I can follow after taking these courses, and then I will actually go ahead and implement that information. And then I'll learn something new and then implement. Learn something new and implement. So I keep going back and forth. And because I keep taking action, I've had results. I think if you're not finding results, it's because you haven't done your research and you haven't taken action. So those are the 3 pieces of advice I want to leave you guys with. Do you guys have any questions?
I'm sure we do.
I was just more curious to hear about like your company and like process starting like that specifically.
I'm still learning myself. I still feel like fairly new to this, so I'm still learning new things. That starting the company is like, it's just like a continuation of the side hustle that I've been doing, right? So it started off as a side hustle, the $2,000 in a year, then $5,000, and so on and so on. And then I think after I hit the $40,000 mark, I was like, you know what? I'm going to turn this into a company because I don't want to work for somebody else. I want to work for myself. I'm going to turn this into a company, so I incorporated it this year. That part was just a matter of reading a law book and saying, oh, you have to file this form. Okay, I filed the form. Oh, you have to get this tax ID number. Okay, I'll get the tax ID number. Like filing these various forms are like the easiest part, right? The actual other stuff, which is harder, is like, what kind of service are you going to offer? What's your mission statement? Like, who exactly are you going to help? Because you can't help everybody, right? How much money are you going to charge? Like, all these different things I didn't know the answer to, and I'm still discovering. So what I ended up doing was I went on Amazon and I made a list of like the top best-selling books on business strategy. Because I thought to myself, maybe what I need is strategy. Like, I don't understand how to create a business strategy. And then after I can make the strategy, I'm very good at following it, right? So I didn't understand how to do that. So I started making that list. And then what I did was I put which ones were available for free at my library and which ones you can only buy on Amazon. So I separated it and I started only reading the ones that I can get from the library. And I'm on book about like 13 right now. I've read 13 since January 1st. And the list of books was like 65 books long, okay? So I'm only like, got like a small chunk of it. But even after 13 books, I have a very good idea now of how to create my business strategy. Just from reading 13 books. Like, because I find that a lot of the themes that these books teach, they overlap, right? They just find a common theme and they have a different way of explaining it and they just use different examples. So that's helped me create my strategy because I thought to myself, like, I don't have that much money. I'm competing against companies that they have like millions of dollars. They attract like the best talent with like from the best schools. How can I beat a company that's already established like that? Well, after reading 13 books on business strategy, I realized that actually a lot of them don't know what they're doing. They're big for a reason, right? But the thing is, once they're really established, they get so set in their ways and the industry changes so quickly. Every industry is getting disrupted by technology, but these people, they're just so set in their ways and they say to themselves like, this is the way we've always been doing things, so this is the way we will always continue doing things. And it might not be the best way, but they have this kind of mindset. And that's why someone small but young and fresh will come along and just like knock them out of the water after a few years. So I've discovered that, and at first I thought it was not possible, but after reading stories of it happening again and again and again, I'm like, actually, it's really possible. So.
You said you work full-time along with like your side hustle. How did you balance your life?
There's no balance in my life. I wake up at like, I don't know, 8 a.m. and then I continue working until 10 p.m. there's no balance in my life. I'm not working like a 9 to 5 job where you just, start your day at work, 5 o'clock, you're like, I'm out, bye. And then you just stop thinking about work. Like my mind is thinking about work all the time. Like I went to Italy on vacation for the last 3 weeks. I just got back last week. And even on vacation in Italy, I'm up till in Italy time till 2 a.m. working. And then I'll wake up again at 7 for a meeting that I have to be in. And then I go out, explore my time in the city. And then I'm back at the hotel at 10. And then I'm working till 2 a.m. for those 4 hours, right? That's a struggle in my life. I will admit it's not all glamour. But I mean, I think that's just part of putting in the hours and burning the midnight oil. It's the thing that nobody wants to do, right?
I have a question. So I really appreciate your emphasis on being proactive and being very self-directed and doing things in a way that suits you. I wanted to go back to your conversation about college, naturally, because this is CollegeNow program, because it sounded to me like you were suggesting that the reason that colleges have these classes to explore different interests is kind of a waste of time unless you're really going to use it.
It's not a waste of time because you get exposed to various ideas that you wouldn't have been exposed to. Like, for example, Steve Jobs, he dropped out of college, right? But what no one talks about is that even after he dropped out, he would sneak into colleges and sit in on their lectures about design. Like, it's during his time there learning about design that we have amazingly designed devices. Like, everything about the design is so intuitive. It's because of what happened after he dropped out and continued to still learn. So I think it's just a matter of like, the thing is affordability, right? Like if you are going to spend, I think, $50,000 a year and take on student loan debt, I think for the value you get out of it, it just doesn't balance, right? Like, I can take a biology class in any school, right? I can take an accounting class in any school. Like, there are many classes that are available in most schools because they're required to be regionally accredited by another authority, right? So I think what people do instead to differentiate which college, which is like a higher cost, is they say, well, it's because of the networking opportunities I'll get at the school. I'm going to meet the right people and be surrounded by the right teachers and students to help me later on get a job. So all colleges, you'll learn the same material. It's just the difference is the people you're going to be with, right? So I'm not saying don't waste your time not learning and not going to college to explore these subjects because they're available even at something like Kingsborough, right? Or Brooklyn College. Yeah.
I think you also, just to go back to that, I think you were talking about the fact that if you want to explore your options, it's better to explore it outside of your degree, where you go to the library and explore for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and do your research, instead of doing the exploration when you're in college and tied to your GPA and also tied to the financial costs.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pressure, right? The number one reason for dropping out of college isn't because you're not smart. It's because of the financial pressure that people face. There's a lot of people I know who went to Brooklyn Tech, and I thought to myself, wow, they're like incredibly smart. There was this like one guy who also like had a 99 point something GPA, just like me. We were very like head to head, like competing and seeing who did better, right? And he didn't finish college in the end. He went straight to college, but he didn't finish, right? So there's an added component of financial pressure. You can't just assume that because you're smart, you will make it, right? I think that's important to think about.
So are you advocating for like a gap period?
Yeah, I mean, you could do a gap period, or if you can afford to just go straight, where you can explore with no consequence whatsoever. Because I do know a lot of wealthy people from wealthy backgrounds who can do that. I mean, that's great for them because there's no consequence whatsoever to have this exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and working class people can also explore at CUNY or whatever
Yes,
city or
CUNY as well. I think
for very little consequence.
I agree with that as well, because when I went to Kingsborough, the grant,
The Pell Grant?
the Pell Grant and the New York TAP grant paid for all of my tuition. I didn't pay anything. And not only that, they gave me about like $3,000 or $4,000 cash direct deposited into my bank account just to spend per semester, right? So, and then my sister right now, she goes to Hunter College, right? So she did the same thing. She gets the grants, and then I don't know how much money she gets back that's left over, but she's telling me like, oh yeah, I spent my money building a computer or something like that. So she gets that low cost option of exploring those various subjects as well. But I think the difference is she has to commute to Hunter from Bensonhurst. It's like an hour or something like that, maybe an hour 30. And on top of that, I think the experience she doesn't get is that dorm life experience. Mm-hmm. So that's something you need to consider, right? If you stay in the city, you get the education that everyone else gets, but you just don't get the same experience as like living in a dorm away from your parents.